Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. A very glorious day over here. I'm looking at the sunshine over here. Just a little gratitude for life. Yes, folks, welcome to another wonderful day with us over here. For those that you have not met me yet, my name is Sadie Uribe. I'm the Los Angeles Regional Media Producer for the Los Angeles Small Business Development Center. Who we are. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. We offer no-cost services to the local businesses through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz. The Los Angeles Regional Small Business Development Center network serves small businesses throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. We offer no-cost business advising, meaning that you can meet one-on-one via phone or Zoom to address your specific needs and challenges. And we also offer amazing programming and training, such as this wonderful show to help adapt and grow your business. So on that note, I'm going to say hello to wonderful Lori Williams, who is going to grace us with a big old smile today, share her love of the world of life today.
Hello, Sadie. And like I said, I really do appreciate your beginnings there. You get better and better at it all the time, which I'm glad you are also preparing for our Oprah introduction someday, or we'll be beyond that. It'll be the Sadie and Lori show. Hello, welcome out there. Welcome, frequent flyers. I got a shout out there to Emma if you're in the chat. There may be a Kenny that is going to join in the chat as an introduction. And Emma, you guys, if you ever saw her on the show and she's in the chat a lot, you guys know her. Emma is the tennis elbow queen on physical therapy. I met the tennis person who is training and trains people not to get tennis elbow. And I said, okay, you guys got to meet. So if Emma or Kenny are in there, do a shout out in the chat because that's what this show is about. This show is making introductions. Just like Sadie, remember we learned last week about Derek being contacted by a potential place to distribute his product through the show. So I like making sure that we are creating opportunity because that's what it is all about. Okay, let me get started with what I'm going to share today. And as always, Sadie's going to be right on all the links put into the chat. I get asked a lot when I'm doing one-on-ones with SBDC clients, where can I go to find out about all your upcoming webinars? This is one place that I make sure always gets updated and the links get put in the chat. So if you're ever wanting to know when is my next one, you can reach out to me. Love to hear from you, as you guys know, or you can also check out the show. So what is the best legal structure for the company is happening tomorrow? And what are the tax advantages? And this is where I give you an overview, connecting two sides of the story, the legal structure and the tax, and get rid of all those myths that are being set out there, which there are plenty. I am going to have my financial literacy series in December. It's so important when people take it, they get such a better understanding of their numbers, more power, more control, more peace in their life. So I am committed to doing that on a weekly basis. Now, I didn't put my December schedule up. I've got some dates that I'm waiting for people. They're shifting around a little bit, so I'll have that next week. But because next week is a holiday week, can you believe it? The holidays are upon us. I don't like having guests come on when we may have a short week, but like Sadie and I always talk, I want to be here for you guys because I noticed that no matter what, you click in. So we're going to have Lori ask the audience, what would you like to talk about? So you can put in any notes into chat and Sadie will pick it up and make sure I get it. If you say, hey, next week, let's talk about this. That way I can make sure it's on the calendar, or next week, you just ask me a question. And it's so funny whenever I start these, I always say to Sadie, okay, if we go 10, 15 minutes, if nobody has anything to talk about, and then we end up going overtime. So I have come to the conclusion, as Sadie always reminds me, is that you guys like to have just a chat. And so I always think, why do you want to listen to me for a whole hour? But we have great conversation mostly because you guys ask great questions. So that's what we're going to do next week. I want to bring up again the beneficial ownership information. And to be honest with you, I think I'm going to do this quite a bit before the end of the year. The reason being is if you were created as a corporation, so sole props, you get to do this, right? You don't have to listen to me at all. This is excludes sole prop, but it pretty much includes everybody else. But if you were created as a, register with the Secretary of State is what I mean by created. Let me use better words. If you were registered before January of this year, you now have a deadline of January of 2025 to file this report. I've been talking about this report a lot. Here is the link to go to. It is a report that became a requirement at the beginning of this year. It is through FinCEN, which is a bureau of the US Department of Treasury. Now, many of you are like, who's FinCEN? And you would only known about FinCEN if you were in money laundering and got caught. Okay, you would know about FinCEN because they'll come after you for money laundering. But also, if you have a cash transaction for more than 10,000, you have to fill out a special report that comes through FinCEN. But beginning of this year, FinCEN got involved in your world because this is a federal thing, not a California, not a state. This is a federal thing. All company owners have to click on this. I'm saying all company owners, there's exceptions, but for the most part, everybody that I'm talking to on this that's hearing me that's registered with the Secretary of State is required to do this. So you have to fill out information about the owners, including uploading a passport, tribal ID, or a driver's license. I'm bringing this up again right now. I don't know, I haven't heard about them going after anybody yet, but it is on the legal books that it is a fine of $500 a day up to 10,000 and 2 years jail time if you don't fill out this form. I'm not even going to comment on that. But why I'm bringing it up and plan to is that I'm still talking with people on daily day appointments, and I'm bringing this up and they have no clue what I'm talking about. They have no clue. So I want to make sure I talk about this every single day until January and then possibly after it, because it doesn't go away. I'm just speaking of those that may not be aware of it because they had previously registered. If you registered this year, you got 90 days, and next year it's going to start out with only 30 days. So it's not going away. I'm just doing a shout out to anybody whose deadline's fast approaching, or if you're fall into this category, you created the company this year, make sure you filled it out. As always, Sadie will put my email in the chat. She'll do that right now. If you're like, Lori, I don't know what you're talking about, and I am registered with the Secretary of State, email me. I'll give you more information. I'll tell you how to do it. I'll even set up an appointment and help you. Real important to get this done. Okay, guys? So that's all on that topic. Now we get to the fun part of today. Those of you who have been with me for a while, you've heard Clarissa Wilson on the show. She's my favorite, one of my favorites. I got several favorites. She's one of my favorites. I have her come back all the time because the conversations are very rich and important. Clarissa is the owner of Nerdy Numbers Lovers LLC, which I love that name. Nerdy Number Lovers is an accounting firm that works with small online businesses to make the accounting and bookkeeping as easy as possible. That's a good thing, easy as possible, right? Clarissa works with her clients to make sure their accounting is done correctly. Oh, that's my pet peeve, done correctly. And the owners, okay, you ready for this? Another one of mine, understand their numbers. Anybody hear me talk about that? You're probably going, I know why Lori likes Clarissa. I've asked her to come on the show once again to share best practices and educate us and tell us a whole lot about accounting. Clarissa, welcome.
Thank you.
I know this is definitely a repeat to those who have seen you all the time, but I love for when you tell us a bit about your background because I want to get out the point. So you took 1 or 2 accounting classes in spare time and decided to open your company, right? No. Tell us.
No, not even close.
I know, that's why I'm saying it as a joke, right? So please start out by giving us your background and then launch into what the company does, because we're going to use that and I'm going to springboard with a question right after that. So introduce yourself to our audience.
So I did start with 1 or 2 classes in high school, and that got me really interested in accounting. So I went to college for accounting. I did get a job in an accounting firm after my bachelor's degree graduation. And then I was also bored, so while working full time, I started a master's degree in forensic accounting, which is fraud. So, so I have the bachelor's in accounting and a master's degree in forensic accounting, because clearly I love the numbers. And like she just said in my intro, I like being able to make it super easy for you guys, because even when I was in college, I actually tutored accounting to other people that were taking accounting classes. And there were so many times where like, why can't you be our professor? Because I just make it that much easier. And that's just the way that my brain works, is to make it easier for you guys.
You
So
know, and it's so true because I was going to say, even with your massive amounts of training, you're one of those people you can talk to, you understand, and you're working with the small companies, which is really, really important. And you know, something I was just thinking about with you involved in the fraud, which I love auditing part of accounting. I love it because it's kind of like this little investigative situation where the numbers kind of say, look here to me. And then I get to go down this pathway. But I bet you that background of being able to pick up and see numbers, this is just a side thought I had, also helps you to see when people are bringing you their numbers and they're a mess.
yeah, yeah.
So that's where we're going to go to next. So we got several hot topics, and you guys in the audience put anything into the question. Sadie usually picks it out of the chat for me if I don't see it, but the question box is open. So if there's any direction you want to go, I've got a pathway, but you guys are in charge. So Clarissa, this is one of my pet peeves. We're going to talk about pet peeves today because when it comes to accounting, Lori's got lots of pet peeves. I just do. And I know we share similar concerns, right? And
Mhm.
it really started because I'm old, I've been around a long time. And I was just using an expression to you, which is one I heard somebody say the other day. I hadn't used it in a long time, and that's stay in your own lane. And what I mean by that, for you guys that don't know, what does that mean? There was a time when, especially under certain professional services, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, I'm a controller, I'm a CFO. They were very defined positions and people knew what they were. And I know if I went back years ago to my tax preparer and said, can you do profitability analysis for me? He'd go, no, you have to get a CFO because I report on cash in, cash out on a tax basis, right? Today I'd go to a small business, not the higher ones, but a small business account, and they go, sure, let me look at your tax returns, which we both know is not a correct answer, right? So it seems like nobody's staying within their lane, and small businesses, this is my concern. Small businesses are becoming, I'm going to use a word I don't like to use, but I feel like almost the victim because they don't
Mhm.
understand the lanes, and these professionals are crossing the lanes
Yeah.
unknowingly. And what I want to say for clarification to the audience before I pass this to you, it means you have, and I'm going to say the whole sentence, and Clarissa's going to take this eloquently from me and carry forth. You have bookkeepers that were just trained in QuickBooks on the software, giving advice on what categories to put it in for accounting and tax. And the small companies are ending up with incorrect reports and incorrect tax returns. And I want to take every moment I can to talk about this in a small business environment so they have an understanding. Take
Yes.
it.
Well, and I actually want to add on to that. So, because you mentioned the tax preparers, most tax preparers don't have the education either,
I
because they
know.
literally just go. So you have H&R Block, you have Liberty Tax, you have all of those places. They literally give you an 8-week training
Mhm.
before tax season, and that's it.
I
You
know.
don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to have any education at all to be a tax preparer. They teach you how to do it, and all you do is file a tax return.
And put things in a computer system. You
Yeah.
don't have to go through those
Yep.
3 grueling tests that I had to do through the IRS to become an
Yep.
enrolled agent that I thought I was so damn smart I didn't have to study for. And believe me, I barely passed them at one point, and then I studied for the big ones, you know? So yeah,
Yep.
thank you for
Yep.
adding that.
Yep. So like there's no education there. And I can tell I know that from experience because I did work one tax season at Liberty Tax. And
Ah.
I had to do that 8-week course. I'm like, okay, this course is pointless because I'm already an accountant, but you had to take the course in order to just work there for one tax season.
Do you know I
So
didn't know that about H&R and Liberty? See, I learned something every time you're
yeah,
on. I learned. I didn't realize. I thought you actually were certified as a CPA within a state or an enrolled agent to work at
nope,
one of those. I didn't
nope.
even know that part. Okay,
Even
that
the
is
even the
wow.
owners don't have to be a CPA. Nope. Because the
I
one
had
that I worked at, the owners were like marketers. That's it.
I just assumed. I just assumed. Well, and goes back to QuickBooks, which you know I always pick on QuickBooks because I
Mhm.
think they're just a marketer and
Yeah.
they are not being fair or clear. Okay,
Nope.
I'm sorry, you shocked me on that one. Let me take it back to you.
Yeah. So I mean, it just comes down to that not having the actual education, so things might not be done correctly. And one issue that I am personally running into with some of my clients right now, because we're talking about QuickBooks, is QuickBooks has updated their stupid AI. And their AI is taking over and doing a lot of stuff. And it's actually messing up the books for some of my clients. And yes, I can catch it because I have the education and I know what I'm looking for. Whereas these bookkeepers that are just trained as bookkeepers, they don't know what they're looking for to even be able to fix that.
Can you give us an example so our listeners, I mean, I know what you're talking about
Yep.
and I've seen it with, different things, but can you give us a simple example of what might get missed that the AI did so our listeners can understand what you're speaking of?
So one of my clients, they have an expense and the name of it is intelligent office. And what I had been doing for this client had always put it into postage because that's what she originally told me it was. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago and it's actually supposed to be rent. However, I have put all of them into postage, but the last one for the month of October, the AI took over and put it into advertising.
Wow. 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 That's a complete different change. Now, what is it? Does somebody turn on the AI or does it get turned on automatically and they have
Automatically, and you cannot turn it off.
you cannot turn it
As
off?
far as I know, you cannot turn
Wow.
it off.
Now, what I've seen where it messed up even before the AI, that was one of my big issues going back to the pandemic with the COVID loans. They would pick the deposits up of a grant
Yep,
as a client payment, and then I
yep.
was seeing people get charged tax. I'm assuming that AI is actually making situations like this even worse, which audience you can see that just, and I want to add this one part. I had this CPA say the most wonderful line to me. He said, automation needs supervision.
Yes.
And it's so true because at the end of the day, where do these numbers go? The IRS, these are tax returns.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, not only that, if your things are categorized incorrectly, now the income is a completely different
Right.
part to this, being categorized incorrectly. But if your expenses are categorized incorrectly, you're not looking at the right picture for your business. So when you look at your P&L and say how I was putting all of this stuff into postage because that's what they had originally told me it was. And then the AI just puts it into advertising. So now you have this $90 in advertising when it should have been technically in rent, but and like it's just moving this stuff around to different accounts because that's just what the AI thinks it should be. Because in my experience, this AI is actually taking it from everyone who uses QuickBooks and seeing it's not just taking it from that specific account. And
Oh,
yeah,
I with you. Okay, so it's a
yeah,
shared intelligence, which isn't specific. And the more we get away from the specifics of the company's
yep,
transactions,
yep,
the worse it gets, the more
yes,
inaccuracy creeps in other
yes.
words.
Because not everyone is going to categorize even the same exact expense the same way. So some people use, you buy Vistaprint, whether it's flyers, business cards, what have you. Some people would put Vistaprint under advertising, some would put it under printed supplies, some would put it under office expenses.
Right.
So they're not all in the same spot. But the AI is pulling it to what they think it should be. And this is where you can't have anything sorted automatically, which I don't, but
Right.
you're just missing certain things. And sometimes this
Yeah.
is where the AI is really bothering me. It'll change the account automatically right before I hit the add button. Like it's
Oh,
refreshing the
wow.
page and I don't
Okay.
catch it because it's already I was it was already correct and then the AI changed it.
Wow. Okay. Once again, every time I have you on, I learn something new. So two comments on and then throw back to you. So
Hmm.
one of the things, and I'm not saying people get audited or not as an EA, we're not allowed to do what the IRS says, talk about audit lottery, the chances of getting audited, which I think is really hilarious. When I had to check that on my test. I'm like, audit lottery to the IRS is forbidden for EAs. To me, it's kind of a marketing advantage, but we won't go there, right? But where I'm going is if suddenly these categories are changing and the tax person isn't noticing, it can, I'm not saying you're going to get audited, but you know where I'm going. It can cause a red flag because maybe the rent tripled by an erroneous calculation and all of a sudden it's standing out like a sore. You're agreeing. You see what I'm
Yep.
talking about.
Yep.
And one place that I was thinking about this, and this is one of those common client we talk about that doesn't know the gross profit margins, but this was before you came on board. And what I recalled, and as you were saying this, I remembered this. She had been working with another accounting company, and the accounting company, and I know you know this because this is when you came on board, wanted her to also get this other software program on her dollar that they wanted to attach to actually do the quality checks to make sure everything was correct. And I said to her at the time, I go, you have somebody who is admitting that they're not checking the numbers and then admitting that they're going to hire another computer software to check the numbers they're not checking, but yet
Yep.
your
Yep.
price is this much. So I think that what has happened is in the small business community through both tax and in accounting software, and I'm not a Luddite, I like technology, but I think you have to be very conscious of when you're using it, right? So I
Mhm.
feel as though the small business community, the providers, the vendors are trying to get the price down to get an appetite to get the small companies to pay it. And in so they're taking away completely the intellect, the skill level, and the personal service. Your
Yep.
thoughts on why it's going this way? Do you think that's what's it?
It could be, but it also comes down to people don't see the actual value of hiring someone to do their bookkeeping who does it actually correct. They think it costs too much
Yeah.
because even my rates are not super high, but I had someone who is making over $1 million a year inquire to my my costs.
You
Okay.
know, you're correct. Clarissa, I'm hearing this across the board with good accounting people that
Uh-huh.
aren't charging a lot by my definition at all, which I would include you in on this, and tax preparers. And we have another accounting person that was saying the same thing. And I keep telling people DIY is awesome. I'm into it. I just learned how to use a table saw by watching some YouTube videos. It scared the living you know what out of me. Okay. And probably wasn't the smartest thing I ever did in my life, but I'm just using this as an
Yep.
example is I'm not against DIY. That's crazy stuff using a table saw watching a YouTube video. So I'm not
Right.
against it. But when it comes to tax, finance, and legal, I think you're playing with fire when you start penny pitching. Penny pitch on something else. Don't penny
Yep.
pinch that.
Exactly. You can't penny pinch on legal and accounting. Like you just can't. That's where like you need someone who is actually trained in it, not someone who has just taken a course and says, "Oh, I can do this now. I think I know what I'm doing."
Yeah. Yeah. Let's walk through some. Let's unpack this just a little bit more. If you were to just kind of briefly summarize, what is the difference in, I'm going to say what you do and what others do, but I'm going to classify it as someone who's actually looking at the numbers and turning off the ad and doing the ad, automatic, turning off the automatic ad is what I was trying to say, and someone who's not. Can you get real down into the weeds for people so they understand what is that extra step? So, one, they know to check to see if their person is doing it.
Mhm.
Two, they understand why it's important. Walk through that with us.
So, for me, the extra step would be that I actually go after all of the sorting is done and you've gone through all of the transactions on the banking tab. I go to the reports and look at the reports and see if something really sticks out at me. And I run this report on so the whole year, but split it by month
Okay.
because most months are going to be very similar across the board.
And you were
So,
writing a profit and loss report, are we
yeah,
talking about
sorry,
here?
profit and
I
loss.
wanted to make
Yep,
sure everybody knows under QuickBooks, you go for profit and loss and you run it by month, and you've got like several months you're looking at. Okay,
yeah.
go back to where you're
And
at now.
then you can look and see if there's big fluctuations from month to month. And in QuickBooks, all you have to do is click on that specific number and it'll bring up whatever's in that report. So if you see something like that, and these are just a quick check that you can do to check this, that something is off because you have a big number all of a sudden. So maybe they did spend an extra $2,500 in that category that month, but still just going in and looking deeper would make sure that you know it's still correct. or the AI took over and put something in the wrong category.
Okay, this is key. So Sadie, capture in the chat, compare profit and loss on a month per month and look at any accounts that stand out as higher or lower. That would be, and you know,
Yep.
this comes back to your fraud, your experience in auditing as mine as well. I do the same thing and I'm looking for trends and something that stands out as an anomaly and make
Yep.
sure I can explain why. I love that, Clarissa, because this is something everybody that is using a software program, which we're going to get into whether or not use the software program in a second, guys. So hold on to that. But anybody who's using a QuickBooks or Xero, an action they can take. So now I know this one's going to be a little harder for people to understand. You probably know I'm going to the balance sheet next. Okay. Now, most people I know do not even look at their balance sheet. And having been a banker, I surprise them by saying, and this is like my little statement, I'm just trying to have people wake up to how important a balance sheet is. I go, now I would never do this as a banker, never do this as a banker. But if you told me I could only have one report, just one report to look at, and I had to make a decision on whether or not to lend you money, of course, we don't do that in banking, right? But what would it be? And people tell me the profit and loss statement, and I go, no, the balance sheet. And they're like, well, why would you look at that? Okay, take it from here, Clarice.
Look at that because it tells you how much money you have in the bank versus how much money you owe to other people.
Yep.
And to tell how this is wrong, how a balance sheet is wrong, you're actually going to look for negative numbers. There should be almost no negative numbers whatsoever on your balance sheet. Accumulated depreciation is one of the only ones. Yes, there might be a couple others, but usually just accumulated depreciation.
And you know what I see a lot of times, and I'm not sure how QuickBooks Word is because I haven't been in QuickBooks in a while now that I'm using zeros. But what I'm talking about is the paid in capital, the owner's equity one. And what happens is I see a negative number, which I know they pretended as if the company just started because they just started using the software. They didn't pick up the data from the tax returns. They don't sync. The bankers find the inconsistencies and it has to be corrected. I know I just ran through it enough so you know what I'm talking about, but this is another thing everybody can check. So talk about what do they call it in QuickBooks on the report? Is it paid in capital or what's the terms they use?
It can still be paid in capital, owner's equity,
Okay.
partner, distribute, like partners equity, all along those same lines. It's all the same thing. So it's still the same thing. And I've seen where these are negative too. And even the opening balance equity, which
That's what I was talking about.
I
Yep.
hate that account.
I hate that. How can you open a company with negative numbers? You know, I'm like, I tell people that's like going to the bank and saying, can I take money out to start my company?
Yep. Yep. Like, but that's where it comes in that somebody, whether it's the actual business owner or a bookkeeper who doesn't know what they're doing, set up the bookkeeping incorrectly. Whether they just pulled in, so say they, because I actually had this happen where a client came or brought a credit card to their business. And this credit card was a personal card and already had a balance on it. So when
Okay.
you connected this credit card
Yep.
to QuickBooks, QuickBooks automatically put that balance as a negative into opening balance equity because the credit card already had a balance. When none of that was part of the business, because like I said, this was a personal credit card that they converted to business.
Which, you know what, I see people do that with the credit cards. I see people just start QuickBooks like, and what I want to say by this, guys, is just because you just started QuickBooks, the balance sheet is from the beginning of the company. And so the people who are helping you or you yourself is helping you set up QuickBooks, if your company's been in existence for some time, you have to bring over the account balances, which a lot of times what I have to do, Clarissa, when I'm helping somebody with this is go back to the tax return because that's the only information I have. But
Yep.
the minute that, and this is the thing I want guys to understand, the minute a banker looks at that, we see that there's an error, and bankers have what they still call is one of the C's. We had people talk about that are bankers on the show, and it's character. It used to be, let me shake your hand and feel good about you. But today, from a banking perspective, if I see any numbers and I don't feel comfortable with any of them, I don't feel comfortable with any of them. right? If I see one number and it's not right, I'm going to assume all the other numbers are wrong, and it's going to reduce your chance of getting money. So it's really, really important to look at these. And I'm going to go back to year end and looking at the numbers before. But what I want to do is I want to kind of unravel some of the software choices. So I'm going to make the statement, we are not here to support or de-support any software. We're just about talking and facts on what we both see. Okay. You ultimately make the decision. But I get people asking about the difference between like a QuickBooks versus a FreshBooks versus, and there's so many new names out there, I don't even know. So I try to explain that you can put them in buckets on, and I'll give you my impression of it. And I could be wrong because you're not in it as much as I am. Okay, Clarissa. So you say, no, Lori, you're incorrect on this, and I'll just get us started. But for me personally, the ones that most assimilate, they're not, but most assimilate to a true accounting that I feel comfortable with is either QuickBooks or Xero. With all the things in place, somebody looks at the numbers, etc. FreshBooks, from what I've seen, they don't run the reports you need. They're more about timekeeping, which I would rather do in a spreadsheet and have a truer thing. And then some of the other software that I see, those really are just little toys to me. I call them toys, that their claim to fame is we do a PDF and people can pay off the PDF. Well, that's not what accounting software specialty is. It's about accounting. You could do a PDF and have somebody pay off the PDF through Zelly or something. So that is my quick take on a few just to get the story going. And then once we get through the software, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about what if we don't use software. But let's first attach this section. So take it from there, Clarissa.
I actually completely agree with you on the software. I only work with clients who use QuickBooks or Xero. If you're using another software, you're either switching to be able to work with me or I'm not working with you. Because FreshBooks, in my experience, they won't even count any income unless you directly invoice it through them.
Yes, I saw that. I saw it. Yes.
Like, so you can have other money coming into your bank account, but it's not going to show up on your P&L through FreshBooks because it didn't come through FreshBooks account. So that was one of my biggest pet peeves for that. And I was like, nope, never working with FreshBooks again. I don't care if they update it. I'm out.
Oh, that's an IRS fraud, underestimating income that didn't come through the software. Yes. Yeah, I thought it was me not, I looked at it with a client. I thought I didn't understand it. I didn't realize that was actually, I was like, well, what do you do with the things you get with the checks and stuff? Oh, no, we don't. I'm like, well, how do you keep track of that? Well, I don't. I'm like, well, that's not good. Okay, that's exactly what I thought. Now, the other thing I always try to explain to people is that when we look at a software program, and we can think about any software on our phone, any program we're using, we input the data, and then the data does something behind the scene, and then it comes out over here, right? And that's true of, I can do a playlist on my iTunes. I can input that I like the song. I don't know what's happening behind, but I know that the song pops up on my playlist. But I understand it enough to go, the song's in my playlist, the song's missing. But where I'm going with this, in software, people don't know how to read the P&L. They don't know how to do what you're talking about. So they input it, and then it gets lost back, and they don't know how to check it over here. And I call that, it's more dynamic. All these things are moving. So I always tell people that when you're starting out or you have very few transactions, which is a lot because you may have a POS system, but it's only dumping one thing of money in your bank account. So it's really just one transaction. Many times for me, and I always blow people away when I say this, Clarissa, I go, use a spreadsheet. Okay. That's better than QuickBooks. That's better. And they're shocked. They're like, Lori, you're CFO and EA, and you're telling me to use a spreadsheet. And I'm going, yes, because I am a CFO and I am an EA, and the IRS demands it be accurate, not in QuickBooks, and accurate. And when it's static on a spreadsheet, you can see it. You know if it's right or wrong. You understand it. So not even just a cost, it's just you see it. Now, I've asked Clarissa, because she has spreadsheets she uses as well. So she never has done this on other shows we've had. But this time I asked Clarissa to talk more about the spreadsheet, because she supports this, and show us what she actually, it's a product she sells. I'm not saying buy it, guys, but I want her to show us how can you use a spreadsheet and it be better in some cases than a software program. So take it from there, Clarissa. I just wanted to set it up so the audience knew what I was trying to do in this conversation here.
Of course. Yeah, so I actually created a spreadsheet, which you should be able to see now.
Yep. Maybe
So,
a little bit bigger if possible.
um,
And if not, okay, yep, that's probably good for
yeah,
everybody that they can see it. Yep.
there we go. I have a 35-inch screen. That's why it looks really small to you.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
so this is a spreadsheet that I actually created, and you can get inside my bookkeeping toolkit on my website. There is a start here page, which each one of these all these tabs down here at the bottom have a quick video showing you how to use them.
Oh, cool. I see. I've never seen this. This is really
Yeah.
cool.
So all you would do is click on this link and it would take you to the video showing you how to use each tab in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
So you have to go to the business details first, where you're going to plug in your information. Now, this spreadsheet is set up so that you can use it over multiple years. However, you have to have the year that you want to look at on your P&L in the bookkeeping year number. So you can have 23, 24, and 25 on here, but if you only want to look at 24 on your P&L, you can't look at multiple years on your P&L the way this is created. But you would look at 24 by putting in that number. And then your EIN, your legal structure, it's a drop-down box, so you can literally select it. And then how much you want to save for taxes, because this is something I built in for this.
Oh, beautiful.
And then you would put your income categories. If you only want to have one, then you just have one, that's fine. And then whatever you want for expense categories, just has to be inside the purple box.
And for listeners that have software, this is known as your chart of accounts. So you're using the spreadsheet to set up the chart of accounts. This is awesome.
And then, so I have it split between revenue and expenses. You would literally download your bank statement as a CSV file and then just paste it in here. And then for your category, you would come over here and select it. So whatever you put on your details here is where you can select the category here.
I see what you've done, Clarissa. This is brilliant because, like I told Clarissa, I could share the ones that I share with SBDC clients, right? But mine's so basic. I say, you got to download it, then you're going to have to type in the category. You know, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm making a monster out of the activity. You've got it really logical.
I made it super simple.
You
Again,
did.
going back to what I do, I make it super simple.
Yes.
And then the expenses is the same way, where you would just copy your information in, and then you have your list of categories and you can just select your category here. If you leave this expense category blank, same with the revenue, if you leave the category blank, it's not going to show up on the P&L because it automatically calculates everything over here. Whatever you put on those two tabs automatically calculates in the right category over here.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you know what? And mine doesn't produce a P&L unless you take the numbers and create, like I said, mine's not anything other than just a piece of clay to show people. But this is beautiful because you're really even getting a P&L. And see, this is what I'm talking about. You can see it. You can look at the numbers. You can understand the origin. And so yours is sorting by name and summing and putting in a P&L. Clarissa, I knew, I mean, I always wondered about your spreadsheet you sold and we never talked about it, but I knew if you made it, it was cool. Okay, this is cooler than I thought.
And then how I said for the tax portion, so this bottom line down here takes your net income or your net loss and will calculate how much you should save that month based on your profit.
Awesome. Awesome. That is
And
awesome.
then there are two other tabs here which do not affect your P&L. So if you want to keep track of recurring expenses, whether you pay them monthly, quarterly, yearly, you just want a list of them, that's here for you. And then there's one other tab for a budget. So you can put that information in here for a budget. This one is just a super simple budget.
That is beautiful. I love it. I'm so glad I asked you. Like I said, I right before we went live, I was like, Clarissa, I want to see it because I want people to see how
Mhm.
simple it could be. Now let's walk through this. So this is part of something you sell. And I saw
Yep.
somebody asked, is it, do you also have a version for nonprofits? We know they're the same thing, but Clarissa, I saw that in the chat. So tell people how they can get it, what it costs in case you want to. I'm not trying to sell
Yep.
anything. My purpose was just to show you guys you don't have to have a software program. You can use a
Yep.
spreadsheet, and hers is, I knew it'd be top notch. So, Clarice, tell them about how they get this and nonprofits and any other questions I may have missed, Sadie, let us know.
Yeah, for the most part, for a nonprofit, it's just going to be the same thing. However, take note, there is no balance sheet on here. You can still create your own balance sheet, or I can custom create a balance sheet for you as an additional expense. Um, but there is no balance sheet on here because you are considered cash basis and essentially not using any loans or credit cards the way that this
Right,
is built.
right.
So that is why there is no balance sheet. But like I said, it's something I can custom build, but it would be an additional expense. So you would do the same thing, just put your revenue and expenses in here, and it would still calculate them. You would just change account names over here for your income and your expenses, and it's the same thing. Doesn't matter the type of business, nonprofit, for profit, LLC, sole proprietor, corporation, all of that.
Yeah.
I would not recommend using a spreadsheet though if you have more than 100 transactions a month. It's going to be way too tedious to do that.
Yep. That makes sense. That makes total sense to me. And Clarissa, going back to the ability to create a balance sheet, I want to mention this. So I've had this happen a couple times. It's not an easy thing to do, but I have done it through SBDC clients. So I'm a part of the ACT team. It's the Access to Capital team that's at the
Mhm.
SBDC, right? And the part I play, which is the worst part, because I'm like, I don't want to get involved in banking. I don't want to do that. I had enough of it. But
Yep.
if somebody doesn't have their reports in order and they're trying to apply for the loan and their QuickBooks is a mess, I'm not going to go in and fix it. But what I end up doing is I extract the data. I put it into a spreadsheet and then I make it a PDF and a P&L and create the balance sheet, knowing that the calculations to make sure it balances. You know how much work that is, right? And then I
Yep.
make a PDF of it and I give it back to the client, and then the member on the access team continues. The point I'm wanting to make is the bank will accept with no issues a correct, because I make it look nice. It's a P&L cash flow balance sheet. It's done just like a professional software because I calculated everything. So sometimes people get this impression that if they don't use a software or program, they can't apply for loans because they don't have proper data. That's not true. You still have to have the proper data. It still has to be organized right, but it doesn't
Yep.
mean that a spreadsheet can't be created with intellect like yourself, or someone that knows what they're doing, into creating the kind of report. So I don't see, as a start out and a small company, using a spreadsheet, if desired to do so, is a problem because it cuts down on cost and it gives you the ability to know the numbers. And to be quite frank, if you're just doing a few sales, seeing where the company goes, it makes more sense than to
Yep.
take on all the expense.
Yes, exactly. Because so this spreadsheet you can get inside my bookkeeping toolkit, and I only sell this toolkit for $37. So it's not even expensive. And you get the spreadsheet, plus there are videos teaching you how to do other bookkeeping parts of your business, making it super simple.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that today.
Mhm.
Thank you. Because like I said, people can say, I can't afford, like, this actually answers Derek. What if you're starting out and unable to afford an accountant? Get your numbers simple under your umbrella, so to speak, be able to understand your numbers. And I always tell people, especially when I'm working on the CFO type stuff with people, they may
Yep.
look at my ratio analysis at first when I'm teaching and it's complicated, but I say the minute you put your own numbers in, you have an inherent understanding of the numbers. So the mechanics of the business cycles with the numbers. I then take the ratio. You then are able to understand the ratio to what's happening in your company. And when people use their own numbers, they can learn it like this. And it's the
Yep.
same with these spreadsheets. When it's their own numbers, they go, whoa, wait a minute, there was a mistake there, because they're not having it hid behind the Wizard of Oz curtain and putting
Yep.
it into a software and not being able to read the reports.
Exactly. because the way that I have this built, like just looking at that income statement goes back to what we were talking about. You see, like say one of your, let's go with office expenses is $2,500 this month, and last month it was only $100. So you would go then look at the expenses and find all of your office expenses and see, like, did you categorize something wrong? Like,
Right,
because
right.
it's super easy, whether you're using a spreadsheet or software, to accidentally click the wrong account.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
that's just come back to, you need to look a little bit deeper sometimes and see what's going on in your business.
You know, it's so true. And I have another thing that I talk about and I teach in my webinars, and that is, I said the IRS requires accuracy. Well, what I've learned over the years, and it goes to what you're saying, is that there's two other factors that determine whether it's going to be accurate or not for a small company, and that is consistency and efficiency.
Yep.
If they're efficient at it and they understand it, they sit down and do it, and then they become consistent. They're always choosing the proper and right category, right? But a lot of people, they get these software programs, they don't know how to use them. They let the bank sink and it runs amok, as my mother used to say, don't let it run amok. It was us that were running amok now. It's the
Yep.
numbers, right? But as kids, we're running amok. But then what happens is they don't do it consistent and they're not efficient. So they put it off till they're tired, and then they put it off, and then they just hand over the numbers to the person who's doing their taxes. So I really think accuracy is a byproduct of it being efficient for you, so
Yep.
you'll be consistent. And that's where a spreadsheet is sometimes a much better answer. You understand it, you're going to do it, you're consistent. I just talked with somebody. Now my spreadsheets are lame ducks compared to yours. I mean, literally terrible, right? In fact, I've got to tell him, I got to go, you know what, I think in 2025 you might look at Clarissa's spreadsheet. But anyway, I helped him create one. It's got the different tabs. It doesn't have the cool things you do. His wife inputs the data from the bank account. They have very few transactions. He's used it for, I think, 3 years now. And I just met with him about doing some more analysis for his company on a CFO level. And he told me, he goes, this is the first year we got our information together for the tax person because I understand the numbers. And so even my, terrible little, archaic spreadsheet, he took over, he made it work for him, and he's got control of the numbers. And that's what it's all about, is having control of the numbers.
Yep. Because if you don't have control of the numbers and you don't actually know what's happening in your business, you just look at your bank account and see, oh, I have $2,500 in my bank account. I can go spend 2,400.
Bingo. You know
No.
what? You just brought up the next topic. Another one I love to talk about. See, you would think it was on cue. I always love to have you talk about this because I can't scream this enough. And we always refer to a common client we know, knowing how profitable you are at selling the products or services, and how that number may not be able to be derived, or probably will not be able to be derived from your QuickBooks or other accounting, and how you need to have separate spreadsheets to analyze that.
Yeah.
I say it so much, Clarissa. Can you say it in a different language and maybe it'll help people understand? So talk about understanding and knowing your profit margins, the importance of that, and where and how you get that data.
So, let's actually go back a little bit. So what she's really talking about with the profit margins, and the client that she mentioned is someone who sells physical products, because you'd still have profit margins with digital products, but not the
Right.
same as, it's not the same for figuring it out with a physical product, because a physical product, you have to take in the cost to make it, the cost to get it to your warehouse, the cost to ship it as well. And all of that stuff has to go into the actual cost of that product to figure out how much it actually costs you. So if you're selling something physical, but you're only selling it for, say, $10, and you're not doing the actual math to figure out that it actually cost you $15 to manufacture this product, then you're losing out $5 every single time you sell something, simply because you're not looking at how much it actually cost you, because the cost of everything went up, but you're not raising your price because you think your customers aren't going to buy it.
Right. Right. Yeah, in fact, I got a saying that I started saying some time ago because when I do these spreadsheets, I'm aligning the data to identify really your true profitability. And I'm also putting in, like, if the owner is doing some of the labor, I'm putting in their time at a rate to replace them. Like if they're baking cookies, the rate to have somebody bake the cookies for them, right? So
Yep.
we're really looking at if you're selling at the correct amount. So I started this new thing where I tell people when they're gathering the data, if you touch it, it's a cost. If you
Yep.
do it, it's a cost. That way they're not saying, well, I'm using my own cell phone, I'm using my own computer, I'm going to get paid someday. Because I say, if you create a company that acts as if you're not costing you any money for your computer, cell phone, or paying you, you're going to have a company that never can pay you and never can buy a computer and can't afford the cell phone,
Yep.
which we see a lot. On a side note, I got to say, Clarissa, and I talk about this a lot, it breaks my heart at how many small companies I see through the SBDC. I go through and I'm extracting their data to do these analysis, and they're not making money, and they're getting their credit cards charged up thinking that they're investing in their company when they're really paying the bills, including personal, with the credit card because the company's not making money. They put their head down and they think they should just work harder, and they're like a little hamster, I call them. And I go, all it's doing is making you more tired and more broke. And I feel like, Clarissa, I'm acting my age again. I feel like since we got what I call entrepreneurial Hollywood, where everybody says, be an entrepreneur and have passion, it'll do it. I'm seeing more of these really sad financial situations. Are you seeing it too?
Yes, I am.
Talk about
Yep.
that a little bit with us. What are you seeing?
It basically comes down to essentially this influencer society
Ah,
where,
didn't even think of that.
yep, that's the way I see it, is the influencer society where I want to work from home, but none of these jobs will let me work from home. So I'm going to just make videos and that kind of stuff and make money. When in reality, they're really not making as much money as they thought.
Yeah,
And they're living off of credit cards because views and likes and comments aren't going to pay your bills.
right, right. Yes. I do
So,
it all the time. You can't buy a quart of milk with a like.
yeah.
You know what's so funny about that? It reminds me of something. So, the young little, in her early 30s, Lori, that came from the little country town and went into the big city and moved her way up. I just, being a little country girl, I thought all these people that drove these big cars and everything, that they were smarter and they had all this money, and I aspired to be them. And I even had the chip on the shoulder, so I wasn't good enough because I was just a little country podunk girl, right? Well, I eventually grew up and became a banker, and they were wanting to borrow money, and I looked at their numbers, right? And I
Mhm.
can remember going, "Oh my God, these people that I thought were so great, they got debt up than you know what. They're not even making money." And so
Mhm.
I realized that because I grew up on the farm, that if you said the beans were growing, the beans were growing. The cow ate, the cow ate, the cow gave milk, right? But driving an expensive car and saying you're making a lot of money doesn't mean you are.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Like you can say that you're making money. You can receive all of this free product.
Yeah.
And side note, all of that free product counts as income. Even if it's
Yep.
an actual item that you're receiving and not cash, that still counts as income, which most people don't seem to know that either.
No, they
And
don't. The
they
IRS
get hit
loves
with that
that one.
1099 in January and they're like, what's this for? I didn't receive any cash.
Yeah.
But
Which the IRS has still not made a final statement. They use the word planning on issuing 1099-Ks for everybody who's using the third party payers like Vimo, et cetera. And
yep,
so they actually get a 1099 showing the income. And I think that's going to create an additional nightmare when it eventually does. They're saying
well,
planning. I just checked the IRS website. They haven't made any statements that they're going to start with 5,000 versus
I was
20.
gonna say I heard it's down to 5,000 now
Yeah,
from the 20,000.
I did too. And Clarissa, so I don't know, guys. I don't know. So I am having to give a speech on this, right? This big speech coming up Thursday. So I always go on the horse's mouth, the website, right? And I read the latest thing from IRS, and it sounded like, oh my God, it's a given. And then I read the words, we are planning on. Because they delayed it and planning on. So planning on, and it is the rule yet. They haven't written the final rule yet, but I think
Yeah.
that may be coming around the corner. So you have to act as this. In other words, The IRS is getting into more information on these small transactions. So don't think that your small transactions aren't being also investigated, because they are. Is that a
Exactly.
fair way to say that?
Yeah. Like, and it doesn't matter if you're receiving a 1099 or not. You still need
Oh,
to report all of this income. Like, that's how it's always been for business. But, and that's the reason why they are changing these laws, is because people aren't reporting the income and they know people have the income.
yep.
So, like, just report it all and don't worry about it. Like,
Yeah. And you know where I think it becomes too tricky for people that don't keep good records. Now, I heard that Zelly is possibly not going to be part of this because they're not involved in the third party transaction. So, according to some things on the IRS, Zelly is excluded. But even when people use PayPal and Venmo, they use it sometimes personally to get reimbursed for the dinner check they picked up for their friends, maybe, and then business. And you're going to get a 1099 possibly on all. And you have to be able to have backing and arguments on why
yes.
this is not in and this is not, this is. So it really talks about, even if you're a sole prop, having a separation for clarification on these documents. I'd rather have a separate account that I use just for business, even as a sole prop that's not legal, because I want to make sure that document to the IRS matches what I put on my tax return. I don't
Yes.
want it to not and have to explain later. Your thoughts on what
Yep.
I'm saying?
Well, first of all, there is a line on your tax return where you can deduct the stuff that
Right,
is not business. So there
right,
is that portion. But yeah, I agree. Like, because it just goes back to the biggest thing in business: separate your business and personal transactions. You should never mix them anyway, whether you're a sole prop or not. Where
right.
with this, as a sole prop, you don't have to have them separated, but you still should, because it's just going to make everything easier at the end of the day when you're doing your bookkeeping, when you're filing your taxes, because it's all separated. You don't have to go through every line item and say, is this business or personal? I don't know. So I'm just going to put it in the business because it's going to reduce my income.
Right, exactly. And that's where I like, yes, there is that separation on the tax return, but I just love documents to line up perfectly with no
Yep.
question. That's just me being,
Yep.
me. I just really love things lining up. IRS got this report. My report says this. It's all business. It's nice and clean. There's no questions asked. I don't like the questions asked comment. So that always makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. On a last note, because we're coming close, and I know you're not a tax preparer, but yet you understand because you're working around this. I am
Mhm.
seeing where tax preparers are getting where they're just number taking people. They're not looking at the documents. They're not asking questions. They're not meeting with people. So what's your thoughts on just that in general, and what small companies need to look at and what they should expect from a relationship with a tax preparer that
Well,
maybe.
that actually goes back to that part that I told you at the beginning, where tax preparers don't have any education. So they're literally just trained on how to put the numbers in the system, and that's it. They're not trained to ask you any questions like, why do you have this? Why this? It comes down to, and even if you hire someone to file your tax return, you at the end of the day are still responsible for what's on that tax return.
Yes, you are.
So if you are giving the wrong information to your tax preparer, that's definitely comes back to you no matter what.
Yeah, people
So,
don't realize that. And I always say, when people, I'm not talking once again for or against TurboTax, but I believe Turbo and the taxes and the software like that. Okay, fine if you're getting a W-2 because everything's pretty much a given. But the
yeah,
minute you have a company, even a Schedule C on a sole prop, get somebody to assist you because there's net operating losses. There's all different, the home office calculation that you do. There's so many complexities that the TurboTax is just sticking in numbers, which is fine for a W-2, but not for a company. Do you
right.
feel that same way?
I do. And
Yeah.
people are just so one, there's the not being educated enough to actually give you this right information, but also um I lost my train of thought. People are just doing what they think they should be doing
Yeah.
because there's not enough education out there with starting your own business.
Yeah.
And
It's so true.
even on TikTok, they give you the wrong information, and the wrong information is what goes viral and gets all of um the eyeballs on it.
It sure does, and I really see it. I mean, I see it rampant in everything, but especially on legal structures. I have people calling me every single day saying, "I want to become an LLC to get the tax advantage." I'm like, "There are none." It
Uh-huh.
is the same
Uh-huh.
form, and they're shocked. And I go, "The disregarded entity, do you know what that means?" And they go, "No, I see it's an LLC." I go, "Because the IRS disregards it as an entity. It's the same thing, you know?" And so it's so true. I say, please don't get your tax, finance, and legal from TikTok or YouTube or any of that. Learn how to
Right.
use a table saw and go out there and hope your fingers are done. That's cool, but not your tax and
Right.
finance.
Well, if you are getting it from TikTok, go to people that are actually accountants. Like I do have a TikTok and it's in the thing to here on this in the comments to follow me. But like make sure you're getting actual information. You're not just following an influencer who is saying hire your kids for $13,000 a year because you don't have to pay taxes on it and it's a
I've
reduction in
heard
tax in
that
your
one
business.
too. Oh my God, I have had so many people call me through the SBDC about this child actor or putting things in a trust. I'm just like, oh my God, not again. You've been on TikTok, I always say that. Oh my
Hmm.
God, here we are near the end. First of all, everybody check out all of Clarissa's information. If you're deciding whether or not to do a software program, check out her financial toolkit. I might call it the wrong thing. Reach out to her, but mostly listen to what we're talking about and apply it to your situation, because independent of who you hire, audit them, find out if they have a background in bookkeeping other than a small couple classes, find out what they know and what they don't know. And at the end of the day, I'm going to pass this on to you in a second for final words, but I'm going to say this, Clarissa. At the end of the day, sorry guys, you are ultimately responsible for it all. You're responsible for your numbers, you're responsible for your tax return. It's all on you. So you got to at least know enough to know you can trust who you're getting to help. I'll
Yep.
pass it to you for your final words.
Yep. Because if you don't know it, and one, you can't use your numbers to grow your business because knowing your numbers will actually help you grow your business and know when and where you need to do more or less marketing. So if you
Yep.
don't know your numbers, you can't continue to grow your business because you're literally like flying blind by not knowing your numbers. That's one of the most important things in your business. And if you can't hire, you don't have enough money to hire an accountant right now, find resources like the SBDC or even my bookkeeping toolkit where you can still learn enough to know what you're looking at in your business to know that you have the right numbers.
Perfect. Clarissa, thank you for always coming on. I try to have you 2 or 3 times a year. Every single time you come on, the audience learns so much. So I thank you for always being available to come on the show when I ask you. I sure do appreciate that. So Sadie, I'm going to bring you back to shut us down here. And Sadie's going to say her words and then she's going to stay behind because we want to make sure the chat stays up. So you have Clarissa's information, you know how to get in touch with me. You can make last comments between each of you. But Sadie, I bet you know a lot more about accounting now, don't you?
I mean, so much. But I mean, well, I don't know if you guys know this. I come from television and film background, and like the one that stuck with me, it's like she does forensic accounting, and I totally pictured like I'm ready to pitch a television show where I'm just like I could just see her like, oh, I uncovered the mystery. She's like that's up on the private plane, and it's like all this because of forensic accounting. Like we can totally like discover new worlds, discover crimes.
Love that. I think that's great. Kate, Clarissa, can we have a TV show down the road? I think we could be a dual team. We'll become Hollywood. What do you think about that? I think that would be something kind of interesting for a little bit. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you so much to my frequent flyers that are out here every single week in, week out. Love you guys. If you are new to the show, welcome, welcome. And I hope to see you next week. Remember, it's just me, guys, and you. We're in it together next week. You determine what you want to talk about. And I always say this, and you put me to it. No questions, no discussion off the table. You can ask me my philosophy on business, accounting, and profitability or life. I will talk about anything you guys want to talk about. So join us next week for, what does Sadie call it? AMA, Ask Me Anything. I think that's
Yeah,
your term you've been calling it,
yeah,
Sadie.
that's
So
right.
join me next week for Ask Me Anything. And if you don't join us because you're already taking a holiday break, let me say to you right now, you deserve it. It's been a year and you deserve it. Clarissa, thank you again for always being there. You have good holidays as well. I will see everybody next week. Bye for now, and thank you for watching Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. See you next week.
Bye.